All right, Philip, the geologist, the nautical Staudigel. Tell me a little bit about the field, geology. What goes on?
Well, I can tell you a bit about my work. I study the chemistry of carbonate rocks. So I study the processes that make natural cements that glue sediment grains together. So it's how sand becomes sandstone.
Very interesting. Where does sand come from? If you're making sand to sandstone, sand has to come from somewhere.
Of course. Around Miami, we have a couple different places where the sand can come from. A lot of it is locally made, so you have a lot of algae that live in Biscayne Bay, and those can produce little skeletons, little houses for themselves. And then when the algae dies, those skeletons can wash up on shore, so that's where you get a lot of the carbonate sand. And then also in Miami, we have a lot of sand that's transported south from Appalachia, and that's the nice white sand beaches that that we get around here.
So in your professional, technological opinion that we can all trust, where in the world, based on sand, is the best beach?
The best beach? I don't know about objectively, but my favorite beach has always been La Jolla Shores in San Diego, because that's where I grew up, and I spent a lot of time there surfing.
Well, what's sand like there? I'm really interested in the sand right now. We're the sand people, not as in Star Wars sand people, but it's in geology sand people.
Yeah. In that beach, you've got these nice dark sand grains mixed with white sand grains, so you get these nice stripe effects.
All right, Philip. This is what I came here to really talk to you about today. Is the dirt force feasible?
Well, having soldiers living underground isn't anything new. Going back into even the medieval times, you would have people digging underground, going under the walls of the castle and blowing them up. Those were called sappers. Now, I don't know how many medieval castles Trump expects to find, but it certainly has been done before.
So, if we can't find medieval castles, we still have to find some sort of ally in terms of the dirt force. So, what do you think a dirt force with the mole people, especially in New York City where they're based, the mole people, will be possible?
Well, I don't know too much about the politics of that.
So, if the dirt force was created, reasonably, how long could soldiers or anyone be stationed underground?
Well, miners and other people have spent a great deal of time underground, but usually that's in the case of a mining disaster. I've seen people spend quite a bit of time out of the sun, in a laboratory for years and years, but I don't know how long, whether or not that's really applicable to a military application.
So you're telling me it is possible, though?
Of course.
We could spend days and days and even years underground?
People have done this.
Interesting. So I'm assuming that we're going to be spending time underground in this dirt force. Of course, not you and me, but if there was a dirt force created, people were spending time underground, we have to dig pretty far. So at what point are we in U.S. jurisdiction in terms of ground? At what point do we get to Chinese jurisdiction? Is that an issue we're going to have to worry about?
That's not going to be an issue you have to worry about, because at no point in the United States, if you dig straight down, would you end up in China. You would end up most of the time in the Indian Ocean, and there you'd actually be under maritime law.
So that's actually really interesting, because if you are underground, underwater, you're governed by maritime law? Would you think that would be the case?
Well, there's probably some international treaty about that. I don't know about the particulars for it, but most likely, yes, maritime law would apply.
So we can assume if we're digging and spending all this time underground without the light, we're going to be severely lacking in some of our vitamins, correct?
Oh, of course.
Which one is that again? C, D, B?
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D. So if we're lacking vitamin D and we're getting paler and paler, of course, would it be reasonable for the military to have to offer their soldiers some sort of spray-on tan?
I don't think that would help with vitamin D, but I think if you're trying to camouflage yourself with the dirt, having a slightly darker complexion would really help.
All right, well, thank you, Philip, and I'm really excited. Maybe with your expertise here, they will actually be able to launch the dirt force. Would you have any further recommendations for the military?
I don't think so. I think they know what they're doing.
So, in the geology field, other than sand and dirt and mud, what do you study?
So I study the glues that bind those grains together and make the rock itself. And in addition to that, you can study the processes that make the sand, that bring the sand to where it goes. And there's a whole other field where you can use these sediments as a recorder of the environments in which they form. So that's a big part of my research, is studying how sediments and how they store in their chemistry record of Earth's history.
So, how is Earth's history? What does the record say?
It's long. Well, throughout Earth's history, we've got times where the Earth has been warmer than it is today, where it's been cooler than it is today. And by studying the dynamics of that system, we can make a lot of predictions about how the Earth is going to behave in the future.
So, I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's 3 types of rocks, right?
Okay. Can you name them?
This is what I was hoping you wouldn't ask me this. Sedimentary? Am I saying that right? Pronouncing it right? Not sedimentary. Sedimentary. Either way? Okay. Ignacious?
I think that's your friend's name.
And metamorphic? But there is one with an I, right?
Yes, there is.
It's not
and it sounds like Ignatius.
But it's not Ignatius.
It has most of the letters in Ignatius.
Ignacious?
Igneous.
Igneous, okay. I was this close.
Pretty close.
But my real question is, what's your favorite of all the rocks?
All the rocks. Well, it's a sedimentary rock. I'm a big fan of oolite.
You have to say that for me one more time.
So I'm a big fan of the Miami oolite. It's made up of these little balls of calcium carbonate that were swashing around in the waves, and then as soon as they settled down, they formed these bonds between them, and that glue is actually what made the Miami oolite, which is what your house is built on.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second, because when you say the Miami oolite, you keep saying this, it sounds like a club. I'm being perfectly honest.
You should start a club. Actually, I think there is a club in Miami Beach called Uid.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's related to the rocks?
It is.
They play rock music?
I have no idea. I've never been. I've walked by it.
How do you feel about the way geologists are portrayed in movies? I think Indiana Jones was a geologist, correct?
He was an archaeologist.
An archaeologist. So you're not one and the same?
No, totally different things. Geologists study rocks, archaeologists study people.
Interesting. But they use rocks to study people. Or they're only looking for... They're digging past the rocks.
They're digging through the rocks. They ignore the rocks.
So you're like the vulture, the leftovers.
Exactly. That's me.
So, are geologists portrayed in movies?
Yeah, there's a few movies that have geologists. A lot of times we're saving the world from us. A lot of times we're saving us from the world. One of my favorite movies was not San Andreas. It was called San Andreas Quake, which I...
A lesser known movie.
Well, I bought it by accident thinking that it was San Andreas, and we watched it anyway. And that was put out by the same guys who made Sharknado. So that'll give you an idea of the science credentials that these guys have.
So it was a little bit all over the place.
It was fun. It was a fun movie.
Do you feel that the work you do is understood generally by the public?
I think it's understood when explained. I don't think it's very much in the cultural knowledge at this point. I don't think a lot of people know what I do, but I can explain what I do to people.
So the last thing, before we go, what's one way you think what you're working on, what you're studying, could be more easily entered into the general cultural landscape?
I think understanding Earth's history is very important, and being able to tell it as a story is very important. So understanding that, say, 50 million years ago, it was much warmer than it is today, and understanding that that warmth was largely because of increased CO2 in Earth's atmosphere, we can then use that and explain that, the direction that we're heading, say, with fossil fuel emissions, has a historical precedent in Earth's history of leading to a much warmer climate and a mass extinction. And using stories like that to, characterize why something like climate change, or specifically man-made climate change, is important. Stories like that really do help, I think.
I agree with you, and I think it's really important for geologists like you and others to go out and tell these stories. So thank you so much for speaking with me today and telling part of your story, and
Thank you.
I'll talk to you again next time.
All right, talk to you later.